I've never been to Italy before, so I don't know the best hotels, the best restaurants. I've never been on an Italian train, but we are planning our first trip there. And so I am very quickly realizing that there is a lot more to figure out than I expected. So in this video, we are starting completely from scratch and we are gonna figure out when we should go, for how long we should stay, where we should go, and most importantly, how much this is all probably gonna cost. I think Italy is one of those places that is on everybody's wish list. I can't think of a single person who would not want to go to Italy. This is your ultimate dream trip. For me, I am a history lover, so the history there is what calls to me. I want to see all of the ancient Rome sites. I also love the arts of Florence, the romance of it, and the southern coast. Just the atmosphere. But what actually has prompted us to start planning and booking this trip is that my husband and I are celebrating 25 years of marriage. So it's a big number, but we got a little sidetracked. We actually celebrated back in May, so we're a little late on this. The reason we're late is because I was in a ziplining accident back in January where I was in a wheelchair for 2 months. And one of the things I've been discovering about a trip to Italy is it involves a lot of walking. I want to go experience it to the fullest, and that was not going to happen with recovering from a very severe broken ankle injury and all the PT, physical therapy I've been doing. So we put off the trip, and now we're probably not going to go until early 2027 or like in the spring is kind of where we're thinking. But that leads me to the first question that we had to figure out with planning this trip, which was, when is the best time to go to Italy? So some of you guys that have been around here and are not new to my channel know that I am heading to Scotland in just a few weeks. We've been doing a lot of Scotland content here, and my brain is in cold weather. So I feel like depending on where you're going, I like to experience the place for like the season that it seems to be experienced the best in, if that makes sense. So I feel like Scotland, I love to go in the fall because that's when I want to be chilly and cozy and comfy. Maybe even the winter, but winter can get a little too cold in Scotland probably. For Italy, it's opposite. I kind of want to go during the spring and summer. That's when I feel like it's the most in season of that Italian experience. I do feel like the summer might get very hot. I'm a Florida girl. I know what it's like to experience really hot summers. And the thought of possibly no air conditioning in Europe terrifies me. And I know so many have been talking about this extreme heat wave we've had this last summer, and a lot of it is coming out of Italy. So I kind of am not as drawn to the summer, I think. So we have kind of settled on, we think, the spring. And that actually fits in perfectly for our anniversary because our anniversary is in May, early May. So if we go even in April, it's pretty close to our anniversary. But I feel like this is your perfect season. And I think like the fall months might be perfect in Italy as well. They talk about what's called shoulder season. And I think that's when they recommend it for a lot of folks because it's the perfect balance of the weather being beautiful, but then also limited on the crowds and also how expensive it can get when you get more crowds and more popular seasons. So those shoulder season months actually were when we were kind of thinking about, originally we were starting to contemplate maybe this fall. But with my Scotland trip being in just a few weeks here in September, it would kind of be like back-to-back trips. And like I said, I kind of want to experience Italy like in the spring, like in the warmer months. So I think of Italy for the warm seasons. I think of Scotland for colder seasons. So we settled on the spring. But a couple of things to think about if you're coming in the spring too. One of the weeks you probably want to avoid is going to be the week of Easter, Holy Week. So Italy, you have Rome. And in Rome, of course, you have the Vatican. You have the heart of the Roman Catholic Church. This is a huge week with the holy festivals and festivities. They have a really neat March. I actually have a friend that was there during Holy Week that posted, and it looked pretty neat. I would actually enjoy being there around that time just to experience that culture and the history and the tradition. But at the same time, that's where you're really looking at crowds. You're also looking at a lot of things that shut down that you might not be able to see that you really want to see while you're there, and it's going to drive up prices significantly. So, probably a week that you really want to avoid. For your guide coming up in 2027, this week will probably fall around the end of March. So, in the 20s will be like the Holy Week celebrations. And I've seen two different dates. One says Easter will be on the 28th. Basically, the end of March, the very beginning of April is probably a time to avoid if you are not into the crowds. However, there are some other fun holidays after that running into April and even into May. So, probably around the time my husband and I are looking. The first event, you have April 21st. I had no idea, or I never thought about it. This is Rome's birthday. And so it can be a very busy place on this day too. There are some extra festivals and whatnot. I think you got to balance. Do you want to be a part of all of those festivals, which I think would be really fun? Or do you want to avoid the crowds and maybe extra prices? I guess it's up to you which is more important to you. But this day marks the founding of Rome by Romulus in 753 BC. So pretty cool. It would be pretty epic if we were there actually on that day and maybe even in Rome. Another date is April 25th. A couple things going on those dates. One, you have Liberation Day, and this basically commemorates the end of the Nazi occupation in World War II. So a big day there too. It is a holiday. You also have a really neat one over in Venice on April 25th. Also a neat custom there. You have the Festa di San Marco, and this is the celebration of the city's patron saint, of course, and the men offer a single rosebud to the woman they love. So how cool would it be to be in Venice on a gondola on the 25th, celebrating our 25th anniversary? Quite fitting. And following closely behind that, May 1st will be Labor Day. So similar to us here in America, they have a Labor Day there as well. So a similar holiday, it could get busy too. So those are all holidays or busier weeks during those spring months that we kind of want to plan for and decide, is it better to go or avoid? So I think that we kind of want to avoid probably the Easter week, which will be huge in Rome, or at least be in another city, but it's probably gonna drive up the prices everywhere. But I'm kind of digging being there at Rome's birthday and the Venice celebration of love. And again, we talked about the weather at this time. So what can you expect with the temperatures? From what I'm hearing, it could be like 50s and 60s. I feel like that's similar here in Florida. Even though Italy, it's along the Mediterranean, it's probably a little bit more moderate temperatures as Florida. I do feel like they're going to be a little closer to what I'm used to here. How to dress for Italy, we will tackle all of that in future videos a lot further down the road when it's time to start packing and thinking about what I'm going to bring and where. So the next question, how long should the trip be? From everything that I'm seeing, first, it depends on how much you want to see. But if you want to fully enjoy the country and really hit the highlights and truly appreciate them, I don't think it can be done in like under 11 days. I'd say maybe 10. But because of extra flying times from where we're coming in Florida, at least 11 days is what I'm seeing. It can be done in less than that, but I think to fully appreciate everything, you need a good long trip. Really, if you could pull off 2 weeks there, even better. We're not really sure yet where we're hanging on that. We're like, we definitely don't think we want to go under 10 days, but we're somewhere between 10 and 14, I think. Here is why. It's because there are so many things that are truly highlights of Italy that you don't want to miss, and several different cities. And a lot of them are going to be accomplished by also the high-speed rail in between. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes, the rail lines and, planning when to do what according to where it's located in proximity to the public transport. So you have the big cities like Rome, which is where probably most people are going to be flying in. They're a little bit actually more centrally located in Rome. And from what I'm seeing, you're going to want to plan at least a couple of days in Rome. You might need to have a good 3 days to fully appreciate Rome. And Rome is big for us too. That's where all the history is. So, history lovers, and my husband is as well. That's going to take some time. So, like they say, when in Rome. So, that's going to be a big bulk of your trip. And then you want to consider the other big cities. You've got Venice, you have Milan, you have Florence. Okay, here is one little tidbit that not a lot of people know and they get mixed up. And I confess that I did the same thing. Tuscany is not a city. I kind of always thought it was like one location versus Florence, for example. But no, Florence is a city within Tuscany. So Tuscany is more the region, and then you have cities within it. So you have Pisa there and you have Florence there. So you would visit two different cities and places, but within the Tuscany area. So I think when people think of Tuscany, they tend to think of the vineyards out in the countryside. And still, you might be considering those vineyards versus what you're doing in the cities, but it's all still in the Tuscany area. And then you have other regional places we've all heard of and love. You've got the Italian Riviera area, more towards the northwest coastline. Now, over along this area, you have what's called, and I am working on practicing my pronunciation. If you've been around here, you know those pronunciations are a struggle for me. Cinque Terre? Cinque Terre. It's something along those lines. I'm trying to practice Italian as well. So these are made up of the 5 colorful villages along the coast. So an area if you want to see the beautiful coastline with those villages. I never knew that was the name of it before. You have Portofino along this coastline as well. And then if you want to head over more into southern Italy, you encounter the Amalfi Coast, definitely the famous coastline where we see all the celebrities go. You would arrive to Naples, would be a major hub there. And then you could even go to Capri. I think I've heard it called different things. Capri? So forgive me on the pronunciations. I'm trying to work on that too in my research. There is always Pompeii around this area too. And you could even go much further south to Sicily area. So a lot of those major spots, you got to think, what are the priorities to you? So which cities do you want to visit? What's in each one? You've also got Verona, and this was the city of Romeo and Juliet. And of course, Pisa. Who doesn't want to see the Leaning Tower of Pisa? I almost forgot Lake Como along the Swiss border up in the northwest there. And this is where all the celebs go, a lot of what we see in the movies. So, a lot to consider. And can you do this all in less than 10 days? Probably not. So, if you want to cover it all, you're probably looking at a good 2 weeks. So, that is the task before my husband and I. For us, we decided, okay, our absolute priorities have to be, of course, Rome, definitely Florence. So we watched the whole Medici series. I think it's on either Netflix or Prime Video, one of those. We loved the series. So we have researched and know a lot about the Medici family. And so Florence is an absolute must for us. Not to mention I have a background in music, and it's just, this is the city of art and music and of the Renaissance, basically. So those were 2 major priorities for us. At first, I thought, I don't know if I have to see Venice. Yes, it would be cool to do a gondola ride and all, but to me, it's just floating water near buildings, and what else is there to do? So I had told my husband, I don't think that's a priority for me. And then he said, but wait a minute, St. Mark's Basilica is there. And I said, oh, never mind. That is definitely a priority then. So Venice is for sure on our list as well. So those top 3 are absolute non-negotiables for us. And we kind of thought, Pisa as well, probably. So we threw Pisa in there. I think we've decided Milan, not as much of a priority. This is your fashion capital, which it's not that I'm not into fashion, I am, but we are more all about the history and the romance. So we think we can skip Milan. And that's probably good because Milan is going to be your further northern one. The other ones are a little more centrally located, easier to get to. So if you do Milan, it's like you've got to plan that extra transportation time around it. But Verona was kind of on the fence. It'd be kind of neat to do the Romeo and Juliet tour, but not as much of a priority as these other big ticket items. And of course, we can see some of Tuscany when we do Florence and Pisa. So we're not going to be spending a lot of time in vineyards. We're not really drinkers. So that won't be a big part of our tour for us personally. But I'd say for someone else who is really interested in exploring the wine country, an extra day around the Tuscany area is probably a must for you. Another one that's not a big priority for us is Pompeii. On one hand, it'd be interesting to see it, but on the other, I don't know if my heart can take it. I don't know if I want to see that dust of families and children buried. So this one I can actually pass up on, believe it or not. So we don't really have that on our list, but I would like to go to the general area of the Amalfi Coast. I mean, so that one's high up on the list too, but not as much as some of these cities like Rome and Florence and Venice. So those are the major highlights that my husband and I are prioritizing. So when you know your places, you can look at the rail lines and the transportation, and the unknown pieces are, what are you going to do for transportation? You could get a car. We're always a little nervous about that. The idea of driving along the Amalfi Coast does sound very appealing. For most of your cities, there's going to be high-speed rail. So Italy has the high-speed rail system, and this allows for really quick transport in between the cities. So for most of the major cities we want to go to, we can just do the rail. Where it becomes a little bit longer travel times is going to be if you start heading south in Italy. So if you do want to cover southern Italy, you want to go to the Amalfi Coast, there's still plenty of public transport and rails, but they're going to be more regional rather than your high-speed rail. So you're going to just account for longer travel times on that. So you really could hang out in the northern part of Italy, northern to central, and do it a lot more speedily. It's when you start tacking on the southern pieces that really make your trip go a lot longer. You could do mostly the cities and like more the northern and central areas in under 10 days, I think, maybe even 7 days. But if you want to tack on the whole country and do some of the south, you probably want to plan for the 10 to 14 days at least. And of course, like most people lately planning a trip, we turned to AI to get their thoughts on how to map all of this out and just see if we're in the right place. I turned to 3 different AI prompts. I used Google Gemini, I used ChatGPT, and I used Claude. All 3 of them pretty much mapped out a similar itinerary for us and kind of said the same thing. So really following the high-speed rail lines in the north and central areas with the cities, and then detouring a little when it came to the south. Now, comparing the different AI recommendations, I tend to really like Claude, how they presented it, because they give it to you in a very bullet format, short and sweet. They tell you the sights to see in each spot and exactly how long the travel times are in between and what mode. All of them start us off in Rome, of course, and have us spend a few days there. And then they're showing like an hour to 2 hours if you're going to Florence and Pisa. Those are the closest ones to Rome. Like 2 hours or more if you're going to Venice and some of the other cities. So they all put it in different order though. One had us going to Florence and Pisa next, another one had us going to Venice next. They all kind of ended up putting us down in the Amalfi Coast last, except for ChatGPT that wanted us to end up in Venice at the end after the Amalfi Coast. So it was still towards the end. But what was interesting with ChatGPT, they wanted us to fly back out of Venice instead of Rome, that it would be faster to do an open jaw flight. So I'm not sure about that. We'd have to research that. ChatGPT did not give us travel times in between. So I didn't like that about it. So I think I liked it least, but what I did like that they added was what the temperature would be like and what to wear in each place. And again, some of ideas of things to do in each spot. Google Gemini was very complete and even gave us pictures with theirs and the travel times. But I'll say Google Gemini added a couple of extras. They added in a day in Pompeii and they added an extra day around Venice Islands. And I don't think that's something that we're as interested in. And so I think we could spend less time there. So I do feel like Claude was probably our winner for the most to the point, best representation of what we want on our trip and what's our priority. It really only gave us about a day in the Amalfi Coast. And I really do feel like that's about all I need. I want to just experience that coastline, but I want to spend the heart of the trip exploring the history in those big cities and some of those regions and areas. And Claude, which is the one that's kind of the winner, has us at about 11 days. So kind of feeling that that might be it, give or take a little bit. So then that all brings me to the big question next. How much will all of this cost? So we've kind of started looking at the flights. That's the first step. And flying out of Florida, where we're coming from, around that time, if it was, say, late April, middle April, somewhere around there, or early May, we're looking at $900 a person in economy, which we tend to do, even though this is a very nice luxe trip to Italy. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense. We save where we can, right? So that's our big ticket item. We probably can just plan to pay about 2,000 right there, because per person, I'm gonna say like 1,000. By the time we might have to pay extra fees. And then we have not started looking at hotels and lodging yet, or, what all of the transportation costs. But I have asked AI roughly again, what do you think all of this would cost us? They're all saying probably plan for at least $4,000 to $5,000 total per person. So we're looking at, for the combined of both of us, a $10,000 trip. But we'll have to hash out the prices as we go along. That's as far as I've gotten so far. I will bring a video when we get closer on breaking down the cost of everything so that you can plan your Italy budget as well if you're going to, based on what I've learned and what we're doing. So a few unknowns left at this point. These are the things I still have to figure out, and that's going to be next steps are lodging and transportation and what we need to book ahead on attractions or tickets, what sells out ahead of time, questions that are still unknown. Do we want to do any tours that are actually organized and pay for the tours to bring us around? I think we're kind of leaning towards, with this being an anniversary trip, we'd sort of like to just do our own thing. It could be that we look into some tours. Also, what is our mode of transportation going to be? Are we going to do all rail, or do we want to rent a car and drive some, especially in the southern regions? That's still an unknown for us. The good news is I hear that they do drive on the right side of the road there like we do here in America, so we wouldn't have to get used to the left side of the road like in Scotland and the UK. So that is a bonus. We do need to figure out, do we need to sharpen our Italian speaking? Can we navigate without speaking Italian? From what I'm hearing, you can generally kind of get by speaking just English if you're in mostly the major cities and the tourist areas, but you're going to struggle if you start going into those smaller villages, into the rural areas more. So it's probably worth it to try to learn a few general phrases in Italian, asking where the bathroom is, asking for certain food, how to order, certain emergency words. But with us, we'll probably be sticking to a lot of tourist places, so hopefully we don't have to learn too much Italian, and that's a good thing because you guys have heard my pronunciations. So these are some of the things I've learned so far in my research as we are just starting to plan for this Italy trip, and we'll be bringing you so much more as we get a little further down the road. So let me know if there's any big important sites that I've missed that we should plan for before we get too far, any places you recommend, and any more tips and information that you have to provide if you have started down the research or have been there or lived there. So stick around because we got a lot more Italy coming, and right now we are definitely in full-blown Scotland mode. So if you love all things travel to all the beautiful places around the world, guides, tips, vlogs, how to pack and dress for them, you'll want to stick around here and pop the subscribe for more, and I will catch you guys all on the next one. Bye.